There are some stories which we're not only an audience to, but may become their participants. Until 1988, it was all a mystery. This old man saved my life and that of hundreds of others in the Second World War. Yet for 50 years after our escape from all but certain death, we knew nothing about him, not even that he existed. Now he's celebrated as a hero. He insists that what he did was nothing to make a fuss about. His story came to fascinate people the world over, especially children. They wanted to know more, much more, and they had questions. Why did he do it? How did he manage to succeed in what seemed like mission impossible? So along with others, I set out to discover and tell his story in a film. Given that I owed my life to him, I could have done no less. Nicky's story came out by accident after this scrapbook surfaced after gathering dust for decades. Once it did, though, it set about a whole chain of incredible events. Oh, hey, guys, that's me.
Really?
Before I left for England. The scrapbook is filled with photographs of children caught up in a lottery of life and death. Some of their drawings, urgent telegrams, and pleading letters from their desperate parents. Messages from a long ago past that brought on a rush of childhood memories.
Môže ruku podať, veselo si zatancovať, keď muzika hrá. Do bieleho dňa, každý musí veselo sa smiať.
Memories of the 1930s, of the pleasures of childhood in Czechoslovakia, the country we all came from. As I remember life in my own hometown of Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia, it was a pleasant, tolerant, multicultural and multilingual place. I learned to greet my mother's women friends with the then standard politeness of, I kiss your hand. It was, and I remember it still, Ruku boskám in Slovak, Ruku líbám in Czech, Ich küsse die Hand in German, and Keze Chokolom in Hungarian.
Herr Ober, zwei Mokka, für Baby und für mich, dazu ein Stückchen Streuselkuchen.
What I remember most vividly, though, are the small things, like going to a cafe with my father, and he used to play chess, and we used to get hot chocolate, lots of whipped cream on top of it.
From my childhood, as a family, we were very patriotic. My father encouraged us to go to all the Czech wonderful manifestations that took part, because Czechoslovakia was for the first time a country of its own, and we all believed in its great future.
We lived in a lovely part of Shanov, in Teplice Shanov, and enjoyed many good things. My brother was marvelous. He invented all kinds of wonderful games for us to do, which were usually a bit risky and a bit naughty. And I would have done anything with him at all.
We live in a small village in the foothills of the Tatra Mountains. And we had a very happy childhood. We spent a lot of time in the woods picking strawberries and mushrooms and wildflowers. And we had animals. I had a chicken, and we had one cow. And we planted vegetables, and my mother taught us all the Slovak songs, and we sang together a great deal. Tancuj, tancuj, vykrucaj, len mi pecku nezrúcaj, dobrá pecka.
We used to go every Sunday to Karlovy Vary along the promenade. My father was an amateur dancer and won many prizes, and it was a well-known and a family outing. We had a good life till the Nazis took over in 1938. Before Nazism was born and grew in strength in Central Europe.
Heil Hitler!
Adolf Hitler ist unser Retter, unser Held, der edelste Führer auf der ganzen Welt.
It started with Germany's Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler instilling hatred in Germans from childhood up for everything he considered foreign. Most of all, for Jews, Gypsies, and Slavs. And he used the hate he had whipped up to prepare his nation for war.
Aber dass die Partei weiterleben wird, das weiß ich. Und dass über alle Personen übersprochen stark hinweg die Zukunft der deutschen Nation erfolgreich gestalten wird. Das
You could hear Hitler's voice raving on the radio. You could see the Hitlerjugend, Hitler Youth, members of the German minority marching through our streets, and you could feel the danger getting closer and closer and closer.
We were 7-year-old children in 2nd grade. And one day, a girl comes up to me and slaps me on the face left and right, and she said, "My father told me to do that." So I was stunned, I was flabbergasted. How can she do that?
I was only about 4 or 5 years old, but I hit my head on a central heating radiator and I cut my head open. And I remember my father taking me to the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and he said, that does need stitching, but I don't stitch Jews.
The hatred coming from Germany didn't just endanger Jews, but also the Czechs as well. They turned out to protest Hitler's demands for a chunk of their country, the so-called Sudeten borderlands. The Czechs mobilized to defend themselves, but they needed help from their allies in the West. Neither in Britain, nor for that matter in any other democracy, was there any great will to confront Hitler and risk war. So the British and French prime ministers went to Munich and ended up signing a humiliating deal with Hitler. The word Munich has ever since then stood for cowardly appeasement. At the time, though, when Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned here to Parliament and waved that piece of paper he had brought back from Munich and declared it to have brought peace for a time, a wave of relief swept through most of Europe, but not in Czechoslovakia, of course.
We lived in Sudetenland, this town of Povijevice, which is near to the border of Germany. It all happened so suddenly. My mother took us 4 children. We didn't manage to take anything at all. We just ran for our lives. This was frightening for children.
I remember standing in front of a shop window where there was a map of Czechoslovak Republic, and in a black ink was marked in the part which was handed over to Hitler. And there were people all around the shop making all kinds of bad remarks and says, well, we can't do that, we will fight and we will fight and we will fight.
I remember the following day loading all our few belongings, there weren't too much, on a horse and cart, and we were out of there. My parents, my brother and I, and at the time I was just 6 years old, we had no clue what was going on.
There was a new refugee girl in our class, and I was most surprised to see that she had no shoes on her feet. When break came, I ran across the road and took out of my wardrobe my best shoes and brought them to her. I told Mother what had happened. Tears appeared on her face. And she hugged me, and she said, "You did the right thing, my little girl."
The first pages of the scrapbook and of our story came to be written in December 1938. You look at the pictures and the list of all of us, and you have to wonder, what made a 29-year-old Englishman do such a thing? In a way, what Winton did was surprising. The world was his oyster. In the depth of the Great Depression, his job as a stockbroker allowed him to enjoy the good life. He was a champion fencer who also loved to sail, to ski, and to travel. In 1938, with Christmas approaching, Winton had his mind set on going to Switzerland for a skiing holiday. In other words, he wasn't exactly the kind of young man you'd normally associate with a passion for altruism. At least not until that phone call that changed his life, my life, and the life of so many others.
Hello?
The phone call was from Prague, from Martin Blake, a friend with whom Nicky had planned to go on that skiing trip. Blake said he couldn't make it because he had gone to Czechoslovakia to help people in trouble with the Germans. So Nicky decided to forget the ski trip and join Blake to take a look at what was going on there.
I went to Prague with the background knowledge of people in England who felt they knew much more about what Hitler was up to than the present government. The first thing I did then was to go around the camps where all those people endangered by the Nazis were living. Innocent huts with one little stove in the middle, and the conditions were pretty terrible. It was very cold, snow on the ground. A lot of the refugees were really in very bad shape. They felt that the days were numbered before the Germans were going to arrive in Czechoslovakia. But how could they save themselves? What could they do? Where should they go? They were stuck.
While Winton was in Prague, he was given a map that shook him up. He showed the map, a map of German plans and ambitions for territorial expansion to France. It says, Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one empire, one Führer. Großdeutschland. And what it showed was that the Germans had ambition to take over the whole of Europe. Nobody had believed it.
There were many other people, refugees like us, small children. There was a fire, smoke from cooking and heating, and I remember being given something hot because it was cold weather then.
The desperation was not just among the poor in the camps. In Prague and elsewhere, anxious parents, having heard about this concerned Englishman, headed for Winton's hotel.
Well, I didn't get much sleep when I was at the Schrobeck. I got to bed very late, and there were people knocking at my door in the morning. I saw those people who were in difficulty, in danger, people on Hitler's backlist for whom there was nobody to help. And I thought, at least I ought to try and save the children. Everybody in Prague said, look, there is no organization to deal with the children. We can't deal with them. Anyway, nobody will let the children in on their own. But if you want to have a go, have a go. And I have a motto that if something isn't blatantly impossible, there must be a way of doing it.
So he started writing letters, here, there, and everywhere, asking for help. And he had no hesitation about going right to the top, writing to the White House, to President Franklin Roosevelt. A few weeks later, he got a reply. Not from the White House, though, but from much lower down on the diplomatic food chain. From this building here in London, right behind me, which at the time housed the American Embassy. And the reply said, the United States government is unable to permit immigration in excess of that provided for by existing laws. Winton wasn't about to let this stop him. He and his helpers started making up the list of children without actually knowing whether they would be able to help them.
Well, this is the cafe that I came down every day. I wasn't sitting there for more than about 2 minutes before the first people came to talk to me and find out how they could get their children to England. And this went on the whole time I was here.
The picture must be of good quality.
As word of his campaign spread, it drew the attention of the Germans. They suspected that Nicky Winton's efforts were about something more than just getting out a few children. When their distant observations produced nothing, they decided they needed to get closer to him, which they did. using one of the oldest tricks in the spy business, the lure of a beautiful woman. They met, as if by chance, at the Hotel Schrobeck. Nicky was enchanted, and not just by her beauty. Her name, she said, was Kirsten, and she was the Prague representative of the Swedish Red Cross.
I dare say she was very beautiful. I mean, traditional for a spy to be beautiful, isn't it? You can't have an ugly spy. It's a contradiction in terms.
Kerstin told him she had permission to bring refugee children to Sweden. Winton's hopes soared. Finally, a chance, perhaps, to get some children out. Friends warned him that she was a known Nazi spy. Nicky forged ahead anyway and kept on seeing her. And it paid off. Kirsten got 25 children admitted to Sweden. In fact, she flew off to Sweden with them and disappeared from Nicky's life completely.
My parents tried every way to get us out of Czechoslovakia. We tried to get to America. We tried to get to England. We tried to get to Palestine. But all the governments said, our borders are now closed.
My mother got up every day at 4 o'clock and went to stand in the queues of different consulates for getting papers for Uruguay and some other unmentionable places. And there was no way out.
We knew that the timing was absolutely essential to do everything now and quickly. The number of children who were in urgent need of leaving the country for safety was certainly over 2,000.
Winton kept on meeting with the families, working on a list of children. Then suddenly, his work was threatened by a phone call from London. The call was from his boss.
My boss on the stock exchange didn't think that what I was doing in Prague was important. He didn't think what I was doing in Prague was necessary. He said, why do you want to stay in Czechoslovakia and help those far-off people that people don't know anything about? He was just a money chap on the stock exchange, completely non-humanitarian, with bags of money, and all he thought about was money.
Winton, to the relief of his co-workers, decided to defy his boss and stay in Prague.
Nicky Winton's efforts came to the ears of all those who had decided that to send their children away. That my father also approached this refugee committee.
My mother took me to the Winton office on Rubešova ulice. We stood in line on a winding staircase for hours till my turn came and I was registered. The parents exchanged their hopes and fears, and we children eyed each other for potential friends.
You had all these refugees who were fleeing from Hitler and who were in danger of their lives if Hitler made another move into Czechoslovakia.
This was the day the Germans occupied Prague. There was convoys approaching. Germans with motorcycles in front, with sidecars, and behind them there were the big trucks, open trucks, with soldiers seated in 2 rows. The people on the street were screaming at them. Women were crying.
Finally, a very large Mercedes drove past. Hitler standing there with his arm raised, with 3 officers sitting behind. It was so quiet, it was like if you could hear a pin drop. It was a very disturbing feeling already to me in those days when I was 10 years old.
As soon as Hitler came in, so a Nazi officer came to our school and said, "Who are the Jewish children?" And another child and I put the hand up. So he said, "Now, all you sit at the back. Jewish children sit at the back." When he went out, the headmaster came in and he said, "From now on, the back seat is the seat of honor. Only the best children sit there." That was Czechoslovakia.
Winton rode all over looking for countries to take in his children. Only one responded positively, his own country, Britain. The rest of the world closed its eyes, its ears, its hearts, and its gates. Winton started his work in London from scratch. There was no organization, no existing pipeline, and he was convinced that time was running out, that war was about to come. From this house on London's Hampstead Heath, Winton conducted his campaign to get the Germans to let the children out, the British Home Office to let them in, to find British families to take them into their homes, and to raise the money to make it all possible.
One of the chief problems was people said that the English government would never allow children in on their own without their parents. I asked the Home Office and they said yes. And they gave me certain conditions which were difficult. I had to find a family which would look after the child until the emergency was over. And each child had to have a guarantor of £50. It was a hell of a lot of money. When I say the committee in London, it was me and a secretary working from home. I mean, we had no office. We weren't an official body at all. So all I had to do was to buy some notepaper and print British Committee of Refugees from Czechoslovakia, Children's Section. And at a very special meeting I had with myself, I then appointed myself honorary secretary. And then I had the police round and asking me why I had so much correspondence with Prague. The situation in Prague was serious. There was active, menacing hostility from the Germans.
When Hitler came, when the Germans occupied Czechoslovakia, I had to leave school. We couldn't go to the movie, we couldn't go to the opera, to concerts, everything was forbidden.
Father was driving along with a Karlovo náměstí, and they saw that the Gestapo had made an action there, and they were taking people out and putting them onto a truck. Every family was scared. Which family was not scared? Every family was scared.
Whenever my father left for the office in the morning, my mother was terribly upset and quite often cried because she was so worried that he might never come home again, being arrested by the Germans. One day, some German officers came to this Jewish town hall and demanded from my father a list of names and addresses of the Jews in Prague. And he told them that he didn't have a thing like that.
My father was a wanted person, and he was warned to leave. A few days later, the Gestapo did come to look for him. They took my mother away for questioning.
Well, I was beginning to pick up tension and worry in the grown-ups. My uncle and his wife committed suicide.
And then the next day, someone came to our house and said, Brno's burning. And so I was terrified of fire. That was the day then that there were 4 synagogues burnt down to the ground.
As the despair of the parents grew, so did the pressure on Winton, with photographs of applicants continuing to flow in. A simple snapshot could often decide the fate of a child.
We received the pictures of the children from Prague with details of each child. We enlisted these pictures in the local press, the national press, in Picture Post, which was a journal which helped us enormously.
What made Winton so effective was that in addition to his skills as a salesman, he also had a creative spark and a willingness to experiment.
And we put 6 or 8 of these children together on one card, merely to speed up the process of getting the British families to choose. If somebody said we'd like to take a child, we just said, with what sex? And then we said, what age? We gave them pictures of half a dozen children. And then we asked them to choose a child, which was rather a commercial way of dealing with it. But it was quick and effective, and it worked. And in most cases, it went right. Well, when somebody wanted to take a child, say they were up in Newcastle from London, which is a long way away, we got somebody in Newcastle to vet the family to see that the family was okay. Then we got to send them photos of a number of children.
My father came home with his eyes shining, grinning from ear to ear, and said, "We think we may be able to save a child." And my mother said, "That's all very well with your head in the clouds, always saving the world, but how can we afford it, an extra child coming into our home?" And my father said, "We'll work, there's a child in need, we'll work out, can we afford it, later." And he got from Nicolas Winton 2 photographs and put them in front of me and said, "Now, these are little girls who are younger than you, now you must choose. This isn't just a game anymore. You have to be serious." So I chose Vera Diamantova.
How did you feel when you were told or asked that you were going to go to England?
We were sitting round a little table, you know, having supper, but Mother wasn't eating, and suddenly she put her knife and fork down and looked at Father and said very quietly, "I heard today that both Eva and Vera can go to England." And my father looked up and there were tears in his eyes, and as he said, "We'll have to let them go."
There was a lot of sadness in the house, and also sort of the peculiar atmosphere. My father looked sad. My mother obviously was devastated.
One day I remember my father called me and he said, "You're going on a long journey. You're going to a country called England. We can't come with you."
The pressure from the parents was incredible. We in London at that time thought that there was going to be a catastrophe at any moment, and for us time was absolutely essential. We cut all kinds of corners, even having fake passports or travel documents made at some time because the Home Office was a bit slow. But it was a forgery to bamboozle the Germans, really, not to bamboozle the British. We didn't bring anybody in illegally. We just speeded the process up a little.
Two days before I left with the Kindertransport, my parents took me to some resort near Prague where there was a lake where they wanted to be alone with me. I saw a very pretty young girl there, and I offered to teach her how to row. And I got completely lost in this activity. When I came back, my mother looked at me with great relief and reproach and said, "Is that what you do to your parents one day before you're leaving?" And I felt very guilty about it.
I have a dress that my mother made for me. She made everything herself. She sewed for us to have clothes, not only for the age that we were at that time, but she didn't know how long it would last, how long we would be away, so she sewed for a year ahead or so. Then the day came that we had to leave. We went to the train. Everybody was there already, my grandparents and all our friends and all our neighbors, and they came to say goodbye.
My mother, with a friend of hers, took me to the station. I can still see the tension on my mother's face, looking anxious. There were German soldiers with a swastika standing nearby, lots of other parents seeing their children off, and a clear sense of tension, which even a 6-year-old child felt.
My mom, she's crying so hard, and she was hysterical. And she's asking us over and over, are you sure you want to go? Are you sure you want to go? I'm frustrated. Why is my mother crying like that? I've never seen her like that.
Transport was due to leave. I'd get a message from the Germans. We can't let the transport go unless you give us so much more money. So they were terrible. You just had to find the money. I mean, it was an egg you couldn't unscramble anymore. There's no way you can cancel a big operation like that.
Was it easy for you to leave and go to England?
I have to say, it was, because I was looking forward to it. I mean, here I was a kid from Central Europe, and I was going to England. I was going to London.
So then, the last thing my dad said to me was, I should be his brave, cheerful little girl. And I think I have been. And he said, see you soon.
My mother was beside herself. My little sister was crying. My mother wanted to hold her. She took my sister through the open window of the train. We kept on telling my mother to keep her, when she took her out of the window. And she held her.
I know how much she suffered, really. I can just visualize it. It just makes me cry when I think about it.
And if she hadn't put her back on, she wouldn't have survived.
Decades later, I would catch myself looking at my own children, trying to recapture a fraction of the dread those parents, my parents, must have felt.
Today, if you have to realize the sacrifice our parents did for us. They didn't know where they were sending us to. It was the courage of our parents to send their children away.
We only had one little suitcase and a little blanket, and we sat on these benches here in the carriage like this. And there were a lot of children, and
A lot of crying.
everybody was crying.
It was a long journey, and so I climbed up on the shelf like this, and I could stretch my legs, and it felt good. I was happy.
70 years after we left for Britain, many of us found themselves making the journey all over again on a special train. It was a time to remember and reminisce.
They put me in charge of you and said, please take care of her. And I put you on my lap. And then we started playing Hopper, Hopper, Writer. You still remember that?
I remember Hopper, Hopper, Writer.
So it goes, Hopper, Hopper, Writer. Wenn fällt der Schreiter, fällt in den Graben, fressen in die Raben, fällt in den Sumpf, macht der Reiter plumps.
Then the next day, when we were crossing Germany, we were passing through these railway stations decked with Nazi flags, uniforms. And there were big portraits of Hitler and swastikas everywhere.
We arrived at the German border. There were lots of Germans crowding around, and we wondered what was going to happen.
There was something very frightening about the way they walked into the cabin, looked at our luggage. It was a feeling that there was going to be trouble.
We were terrified that they would do something like maybe arrest us. We didn't know. I mean, we had the biggest fears. We were dumbfounded. But finally they got off and we were delighted. We breathed a sigh of relief.
We finally arrived to Holland. Through the entire train, there was an atmosphere of relief. It was like coming out of a tunnel. It was very strikingly different, as if the sun started shining.
We came to the windows and we started shouting, Hitler, Göring, Goebbels, Dopperdelle. Dopperdelle means into the ass. And we were very happy about this.
I remember very well that the first stop in Holland was at a railway station where there were a group of ladies.
Some lovely ladies dressed in Dutch national costumes came. And they smiled, although we couldn't understand the word they said. They didn't have to talk. It was clear that we were going to get something good to eat.
They gave us cocoa, the famous Dutch droste cocoa, and which was delicious.
And we received white bread. We had never eaten this kind of bread. And I felt that either it was wet, or that somebody wetted it, may have been cold.
And it seemed kind of odd to me, kind of pap, that I didn't really like.
The bread? Well, it's very difficult to describe.
It's indescribable.
We finally did reach the Channel coast and boarded a ship, and the ship just seemed huge to me because the only ships I'd ever seen before in my life were the little paddle steamers that went up and down the Danube. in Bratislava. And being little boys, we were fascinated by the ship and looking around, climbing up and down gangways and just running along all over the place.
It was fun to go on a boat. I'd never been on a big boat to cross the channel.
That night, as we crossed the English Channel, suspended for a few hours in the calmness of the ship rocking us to sleep, I heard voices from nearby cabins singing the Czech national anthem. Kde domov můj, where is my home, where is my home? It was a question that remained unanswered for many of us for years. A question that for a few remains unanswered to this day. Liverpool Street Station. This is where we arrived in London. It's all changed, of course, except for all the noise. What I remember most is one of those little odd facts that stick in your mind your whole life, and that is getting off the train, that you didn't have to climb down to the rails as you did in Central Europe, that the platform was even with the train door, and all you had to do was just step out. I was very, very impressed.
Liverpool Street Station saw the arrival of another group of refugee children, another piteous cargo thrown overboard by the ruthless code of the modern European temper. A special effort is being made to help the refugees on Mother's Day.
Then the train arrived and you had up to 200, 250 children getting out, and you had to get the right child to the right family. And you had to treat it as a business. When you got the right child to the right family, the family had to sign for the child so that you had some proof of delivery.
Assembled us kids in a corner. There were a bunch of grown-ups waiting behind a barrier, craning their necks, waiting to pick us up. A lady behind a wooden table called my name, Ben Abeles. A lady my mother's age came over, embraced me, and kissed me.
I remember when I arrived, having this uncomfortable string round my neck and a big placard on my chest, and I just was totally alone with nobody around me. And I was obviously waiting for the family who I was going to pick me up, and I was just three years old.
There's bound to be troubles and difficulties. Some children got left behind and the police looked after them until we could sort things out. It was fairly chaotic, but it worked out.
There were 5 boys sitting on suitcases, waiting for somebody to pick us up. Nobody picked us up. It was late at night, and a taxi driver came over and asked us, "You've been here since 7 o'clock in the morning. Are you hungry?" And he drove us not far away from the station to a fish and chip shop. I remember him showing us putting salt and vinegar for the first time onto the fish. I know to this day that the fish and chips was very good. Later, he took us to his own wife and small child in a single-bedroom apartment in which he put us up, the five of us. English people as a people are extremely kind, and I would say the poorer they were, the kinder they were.
And we all were ushered into a big hall, and there were hundreds of the children. I had no idea where I was going, and child after child, hundreds of these children, one after the other went. And I was left sitting there, trembling at the knees. And suddenly the door opened, and a little lady ran towards me, laughing and smiling at the same time, with tears streaming down her face as well, and she hugged me, and she spoke words I didn't understand then, but they were, "You shall be loved." And that's the most important words any child can hear.
Mr. and Mrs. Nunn, the family that took us in, they were Methodist farmers in Redgrave in Suffolk, East Anglia. Their cottage had a thatched roof. I'd never seen a thatched roof. My cousin and I went around the walls knocking. We were afraid it may fall down. And for instance, the toilet was outside. There was no electricity. And they were good to us. They were true Christians in the real sense of the word.
And the only people who objected to what I was doing was when one day a couple of rabbis arrived at home and said that they understood that some of the good Jewish children I was bringing over to this country were going to Christian homes, and that must stop. And I said, well, it won't stop, and if you prefer a dead Jew in Prague to a live one who is being brought up in a Christian home, I said, that's your problem, not mine.
My guardian came from a distinguished Scottish family and had an enormous influence on my life. She provided me with an ethical yardstick. The lessons of her life were her extraordinary unselfishness. Barney gave me this wonderful dog, a Great Dane, and I was very small, and I could ride on his back, on the dog's back.
We used to play mothers and fathers. Do you remember?
Yeah, we just played very happily together.
We did, and then we played cowboys and Indians.
The sun has got his hat on, hip, 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 hooray! The sun has got his hat on and he's coming out
My
today.
first day in London, Audrey, my guarantor's daughter, took me to Harrods here. There were so many new sights for me. We had a great time running around. I decided I was going to marry Audrey, even though she had pimples, but I wanted to live in that rich house of theirs.
Once the children had arrived and with their new families, I had no contact with them anymore. I knew that they were being well looked after, and some went to the Czech school in Wales.
We had many pillow fights in school, and many a time these pillows burst and the feathers flew out and we had to clean it up. I liked it there. It was a good atmosphere with boys and girls together.
Let's face it, I couldn't run down those stairs like that any longer.
But I do remember those days at the Czechoslovak school as though they were yesterday.
Despite the separation from our family, despite the fact that we missed them so much, those were some of the happiest times in my life, and in that of many of my schoolmates.
We also did things in the community. We went to old age homes and spent time with the people there. We learned that you are not the center of the universe, that there are other people out there who have problems and needs, and maybe you can do something about it. So it was fun. It was great fun. But also we acquired an education.
Well, we were all crazy about the boys, all of us girls, you know. We tried to attract their attention in every way it was possible, and when I look back at it, we were absolutely nuts.
I was inexperienced with girls, and I asked my brother how to arrange girls when I finally took them out. His advice was I should take them to the cinema and when the lights went down to put my arm round her and that everything else would follow. But so I'm afraid his advice was good in theory, but not very good in practice.
The month of August, which is normally a happy month of holidays, has been passed in Europe beneath the shadow of war. Hitler demanded Danzig and the Polish corridor which runs between Germany and East Prussia.
I've got a letter here which my father wrote to the foster parents. You will, I suppose, feel how it aches us to be separated from our own child. Here, however, the possibility to care for her suitable future is smaller with every day.
As the months passed, Winton knew the end was nearing, and so he kept on pressing even harder for permits for more children.
I mean, there were thousands of children on the lists who wanted to get out. We had organized 8 transports from Prague. No transport completed the operation. I mean, it was an operation without end. For the beginning of September, we had arranged our biggest transport, which would have comprised 250 children. All the paperwork was done, all the families were prepared to take the children, all the children were waiting in the train.
Auf Anordnung des Reichsprotektors in Böhmen und Mähren wird der zwischenstaatliche Eisenbahnverkehr mit sofortiger Wirkung eingestellt.
Defend our island, whatever the cost. We shall never surrender.
I was in London. We watched the planes coming over, dropping bombs. I remember the houses fell down like cards or domino sticks. Just collapsed. I was afraid to go out on the street afterwards. It was a terrifying experience. Our neighbors got a direct hit on their shelter in the garden, and all of them were killed.
During the Battle of Britain, bombs were raining down on us every night. I was then an apprentice cook at the Bailey's Hotel in London as a dishwasher and a pot washer. And every night, practically, we ended up in the air raid shelter. I was sitting next to a maid, and when a bomb was falling, she clutched my knee. And I asked her whether we could share a blanket, and she agreed. And then I put my hand on her knee, and she didn't object. And my hand started roaming, and she didn't object either. And so I was really looking forward to these air raids. But then there was a lull in the air raids, and I missed her so much.
My mother was absolutely heartbroken, and she wrote us long letters. My dearest children, I'm very happy that you are over there and don't know about evil. All Jews under 50 here must work in labor camps. We will come through somehow, and you mustn't worry about us. But I'm very happy that you are not here.
We learned about the concentration camps and the possibility that our parents might have been taken to them. We all hope that nothing awful happened to them, that they were well.
The last letter from my father came in 1942. He wrote that they had received orders to pack up, that they were being transported somewhere else, and in which he sort of wrote to his sons, telling them not to forget the precepts they were taught at home, and he hoped the Almighty would allow us to grow up into just and decent men. And that was the last thing I heard from my parents.
Greatest regret was that our biggest transport, which was 250 children, which was due to leave at the beginning of September, was cancelled because war started. And almost none of those children survived.
Nothing that happened prior to the war starting was really of any importance anymore. What was done, what couldn't be done, what had been done was done.
Once you can't stop a war, and there is a war, you, I suppose, go to the defense of your country, and I joined the RAF.
I joined the Royal Air Force, our Czech squadron, number 311, and our job was to look for enemy shipping.
I volunteered for the Czech RAF, and I was able to help to hunt German submarines. I wanted to help to liberate my country.
There's a garden, what a garden, only happy faces bloom there, and there's never any room there for a worry or a gloom there. Oh, there's music, and there's dancing, and a lot of sweet romance.
decided to go to town to see how everybody was celebrating. And Trafalgar Square, I remember in London, where everybody went around putting up their two V for Victory. Everybody laughed. That was so gay. We were dancing with American soldiers.
We returned to Prague with the whole squadron. All of us very happy to be home. There was a huge parade in Prague, in which I took part as well. All the girls were dressed in national dress, and all of us enjoyed it.
Was over, but still no news of our families. Many of us came back to Czechoslovakia to look for them. I came to Prague, here to this building behind me, which served as a clearinghouse for separated families. Inside, wall upon wall filled with notices put up by people looking for their missing loved ones. Of my parents, though, not a trace. I know they were deported to Poland, but to this day, I'm not certain how they came to die.
My first stop in Prague was the house from which my parents were deported to Terezín. There was a minimal chance that they would have come back. I lingered for a while, as if I were waiting for them to appear suddenly, but in vain.
My mother and my brother, together with about 10 other children, arrived to Auschwitz and were sent to the gas chamber. An old friend of the family who took care of the dead bodies immediately recognized my mother. He told her, "Please take your children, go in, sit down in the corner, and start to sing with them. Because if you sing and you inhale the gas, you will die very quickly."
When my parents went to concentration camps, and when they saw other children around them, young boys and the girls being taken to gas chambers and so forth, that they must have then realized what they had done. When they sent the children.
my family. My parents, none of these people survived. So after the war, we had to continue living to overcome the past. We were all young. We were beginning. We had to build careers.
You know, we're spread all over the world. Some of us in Canada, in the States, in Israel, in Australia, in France, in Britain. Wherever we ended up, the most important thing for us was to start a new life with new families.
I hadn't got a clue where all these 700 children were. I wasn't in touch with any of them. For me, it was an episode, and it was something that happened. So many more important things happened in the meantime.
He's very keen on his gardening and he spends a lot of time in the garden, but he's a very domesticated husband. He does a lot of helping out in the house. I get annoyed because he's very untidy. I'm not all that tidy, but he is really very untidy.
I'm fairly happy with Greta, with what I've done and what we do together.
Fairly, I like that.
Very happy. Very happy. Any good marriage is a marriage of compromise. The only thing was, Greta compromised more than I did. She was quite a very, very special person. If you're in love with somebody, everybody says when that person dies, after a time things will get better. It's not true. They get worse. Instead of living, you just exist. And I spent my time with carpentry, mending the bicycle, photography. I listen to music, at home I embroider, I do a bit of gardening.
My father has been involved in helping charities nearly all his life. A lot of his work's been with Abbeyfield, a charity helping old people.
I'm just building a home for Alzheimer's at a cost of £4 million.
He still acts as if he's half his age. He's still very active and still likes making mischief. Oh, his current plan is to try and be arrested, to show what a silly law we have to do with helping old people.
Well, I drive and I like driving quickly.
You got a speeding ticket last month. What
I got a speeding ticket in a one-way road where there was no other car, and I was doing 50 miles an hour in a 40-mile area. The police said, "Have you got any excuse? Have you got any reason why you were doing it?" I said, "Yes, I had to get to the lavatory."
Being so active must be like a recipe for longevity with my grandpa, just to keep going and not stop.
Nicky, your last words before you go.
My last words was that I hope I'll come back.
One thing I've learned from Grandpa is that you should always try and help people. So if the opportunity presents itself.
I don't mind if you tell the truth.
Of course I love my grandpa. With all the world, everything.
When you're young, you take everything in life, including survival, for granted. As I grew older, though, I began to wonder more and more how it was that when so many died, our parents, friends, families, and millions of others, how it came to be that we fortunate few on those trains from Prague were spared. That is, until 50 years later, when this scrapbook surfaced, then we knew. The scrapbook and its story gathered dust for decades in the Winton's attic, until one day, Nicky's wife Greta found it, opened it, became fascinated, and yet was puzzled. And so 50 years after it happened, Nicky Winton finally told his wife what he had for so long kept secret.
I suppose there are quite a number of things which husbands don't tell their wives.
And his wife went to London and she tried to give this story to several people, but nobody was interested until she came to me. I was given the scrapbook and this list of names, and I thought it was very moving because they were ordinary names of people and Czech children. For instance, Berman Thomas, Bekefi Jiri, Benedict Ruth, and we wrote to every one of them. And from these over 600 names, we got 250 answers. And most of the children were delighted. They did not know who had saved them, and they did not know their own story. It caught the eye of Esther Ranson, who was working for the BBC.
So we did some research, and we managed to track down some of those children, now adults, living in England. We were absolutely thrilled.
This lady said to me, "What's your name?" So I said, Pinkasovich. When I saw my name and my brother's name printed, it is the biggest shock of my life. I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe. I've had goosebumps all over my arms. All these years, 50 years.
Nobody knew who masterminded our rescue, and then out of the blue I was asked to take part in a television show, That's Life, where to my joy and such fulfillment, I came to face to face with the man who saved my life.
They got me there in a way under false pretenses. Well, then I was sat in a seat which was focused on the camera, and I became part of this program. I didn't know I was going to meet for the first time the children that I'd brought over so many years before.
Managed to save 664 children. This is his scrapbook. There are all kinds of fascinating pictures in it. Perhaps you can see, this is a picture of Nicolas Winton himself with one of the children he rescued. If you look at the very back of this scrapbook, fascinating things in it, all the letters. But back here is the list of all the children. This is Vera Diamant, now Vera Gissing. We did find her name on his list. Vera Gissing is with us here tonight. Hello, Vera. And I should tell you that you are actually sitting next to Nicolas Winton.
I wore this around my neck, and this is the actual pass that we were given to come to England, and I'm another of the children that you saved.
there anyone in our audience tonight who owes their life to Nicolas Winton? If so, could you stand up, please?
We are part of his family. He has now accepted us as a sort of an honorary father, and he's accepting our children as honorary grandfather. He is the head, I think, of the biggest family in the world.
When our memorial train from Prague arrived in London, the man who had waited for us at the station in 1939 was waiting for us once again. This time, though, at age 100, we knew who he was.
It was a wonderful thing that Nicky Winton did, and without him, nobody in this room would be sitting here. I wouldn't be here, Dad wouldn't be here. So it's quite a wonderful thing that he did.
A lot of us have a feeling that we have to somehow repay Winton for all what he did. We do it by doing work which is useful and good and help other people. For the last 12 years, I work as a volunteer at the Schneider's Children's Hospital, and I really enjoy it.
I did some work in research on ballistic missiles, but after that, I changed my career completely. We built this church first, and then home for adults with severe mental handicap.
I've always felt that I owe something to Nicky Winton, to my parents who were so courageous and sent me off. And so I always felt that I need to help people, and I've done that in the soup kitchen, and throughout my life I've always tried to be very helpful.
I spent most of my professional career working on semiconductors. We invented the thermoelectric power generator, which provides electric power to the spacecrafts Voyager 1 and 2 on their way to Jupiter, Saturn, and the other outer planets.
Nicky's deed is like a small stone thrown into a small lake. And the ripples and the waves from that stone are getting wider and wider and wider. And the wider it gets, the more good is being done in the world.
Nicolas Winton saved Grandma, and he didn't have to. And that made me want to help people too. And I heard about people who had cancer and had lost all their hair. And I cut 10 inches off my hair, and they made it into a wig for one kid who had cancer. And I feel very good about doing that.
This summer, I helped organize a peace camp for girls. There were 7 Jews and 7 Arabs. We all realized that we're the same, and that we're living in the same place, and we do need to find somewhere peace. Right now, I have 7 new Palestinian friends, which I very much like.
Many young people from different countries were eager to show Winton what good they themselves were doing. So they started filming their activities, interviewing various personalities, all for a special program which they will present in Prague.
Shipped out clothes and packages to people in Ecuador, and it was really nice getting letters back from them as they were writing and trying to, and expressing how appreciative they were to us that their lives had changed. Winton is showing that with perseverance and determination you can achieve anything.
In Cambodia, where we arrived, we have seen children dying on the streets.
There was no organization helping HIV/AIDS kids.
And we have decided that we have to help these children. The problem was that everybody was against this idea, saying that what two Slovak people can do in faraway Cambodia. But we have decided not to give up. I remember Nicolas Winton said that everything is possible if it's fundamentally reasonable.
All stories that help children grow in a world in which humanity is being celebrated and inhumanity denounced, these stories are important.
Everybody can help, even children can send their letters or small things to the kids to show them their affection and love, that there is somebody far away thinking about them. It's a big help. We have saved and treated over 5,000 children, but still we have a lot of work to do. A lot of children still waiting for us.
We need special effort to bring up our basic nature of human beings, compassion. Here is example, Nicolas Winton. So we should learn from his motivation and from his courage, from his act. We must carry his spirit generation to generation. Then humanity's future will be brighter.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Nicolas Winton.
We've been so much impressed by Nicolas Winton's story that we started our project, Suitcases for Cambodia. Suitcase is a symbol of our help for children.
I just think that every single person on the earth needs to know that they are special, that they're loved.
Nicolas Winton has influenced so many people all over the world to help someone who is very ill or in danger.
You don't have to be a politician or a billionaire to make a difference. All you have to have is some ambition and courage.
I never thought what I did 70 years ago was going to have such a big impact as apparently it has. And if it has now got a story which helps people to live for the future, well, that will be an added bonus.